Hello, my name's Leslie Whitty. I am the Vice President of Outreach and Communication for the South Central Workforce Development Board. And joining me, I have Dr. Robert Boone, who is our President and CEO, and also John Swords, who is the VP of Operations. And we will be going through our monthly open jobs report, analysis, and review. So thank you so much for joining us. I'll turn it over to Dr. Boone.
Thank you, Leslie. It's great to be with you all again today. And I just wanted to provide a little bit of context for our open jobs report. This analysis and review is for the month of October. And we really wanted to portray all of the open jobs in the 10 counties of South Central Kentucky. But I will say first, before we get started, that we're talking really about advertised jobs. So advertised jobs do not necessarily equal open jobs. We're using a program called Jobs EQ, and that program is widely respected and used by economic development organizations and workforce boards throughout the entire country. What it does is it scours the internet and finds job postings on Monster, Career Builder, and other job boards. And it does some level of analysis of those job openings. But it really depends on jobs, first off, that are posted on the internet in a major on a major platform. So that's one limitation of the software already. Secondly, the software does occasionally count jobs that are outside the region into the overall count. And of course, that's a limitation. So when you just get the software and do a very fundamental analysis, that's the number you get. So our workforce board decided a few months ago to really do a deep dive into what these numbers look like for our 10 county area. And our hope in doing this is that these numbers can be valuable in determining our economic health. Also, they're valuable in determining what jobs are open and posted and what jobs may exist in the future. Again, these aren't job openings per se, they are job advertisements, but this is the best data we have. And I would like to go through a little bit of that data with you. Leslie, if you'll progress to the next slide, we have some percentages that really paint a picture of the jobs EQ data. First, you'll notice that we have 7,218 advertised jobs for the month of October in the 10 counties of South Central Kentucky. In a deep dive analysis of that number, we have found that 1,788 of those jobs are part-time positions. That represents about 25% of the overall number of advertised jobs in the region. Moving on, we also found in our deep dive that 4,173 of those jobs are at $15 an hour or below. That represents a pretty hefty percentage of about 58%. And I think that, many of the part-time jobs are probably jobs that are also at $15 or below. So there's some overlap in those two categories. But at any rate, a large percentage of the jobs advertised based on Jobs EQ data are $15 an hour or less. We also have a pretty high number, 15%, at 1,083 jobs that are advertised in our region, but exist outside of our region. So we all have had the experience of getting on Monster or Career Builder or another site and finding jobs that pop up when you type in Bowling Green, Kentucky, for example. And when you do a little bit of research into that company, you find that the job is advertised in our region, but may be headquartered or maybe a work from home type of job that exists outside of the region. Or it may be in the transportation sector, for example, and maybe that job is outside of the area, but they're trying to recruit talent in our area. So 1,083 of those jobs posted are outside of the area. In addition, 63% of the job ads do not identify educational requirements. So the job ads may identify some skill sets that are needed, some job duties, but 63% of them do not indicate any particular training, whether that be training post high school or certifications or anything like that. 63% do not identify any educational requirements. This can be a big challenge for our educational providers in the area as they seek to design educational programming to meet our workforce needs. If the job advertisements do not have educational requirements that are specific and explicit, then it can be a challenge for our educational providers to really meet the needs in our area and make sure our students, our graduates, have the kind of curriculum and credentials they need in order to compete in our local market. 63%, again, of the job ads do not identify an education requirement. We'll go through these numbers in a lot greater detail. John will take over here in a couple minutes and go through these in much more detail. I just wanted to provide you with a big picture look for context for our agenda, which is our next slide. So our agenda this morning will be the executive interview overview that I just finished, and then we'll go sector by sector into the open jobs report for our deep dive. And then finally, we'll close that out with some data trends and an overall summary. So at this time, I'll turn it over to our Vice President of Operations, John Swords.
All right, good morning. So pleasure to provide this presentation once again. For those of you that are watching that are new to this, this is our third monthly open jobs report. And, you know, as such, as the third one, we are starting to see some consistency in the data and getting a better handle on some of the trends we're seeing. So I'll begin with this executive overview slide and just kind of very briefly go through this and how to read it. So first of all, we'll start right here in the, you know, in the kind of the top left. The South Central Workforce Development Board is responsible for a 10-county region of South Central Kentucky. And so, you know, that's just a graphic depiction of what we're focused on. So when we do our data queries and our data pulls, we're really trying to pull for these 10 counties and these 10 counties alone. When you look at the total number of jobs in this region, there are 130,500 jobs, both filled and unfilled, in this 10-county region. Top middle, you'll see the major industry clusters that we focus this report on. So at the top, the number one industry cluster, retail, hospitality, food, we group those together. We cluster them together because of how closely related those sectors are. And you'll see that there are approximately 28,000 jobs in the retail, hospitality, food sector. Next is manufacturing with 26,200 jobs. Third, healthcare and social assistance. Fourth, professional services cluster. Fifth, construction. Sixth, transportation, distribution, logistics. And then at the bottom, all other sectors. So you can see the numbers there. And then to the right of that, you see a pie chart, and it just shows you what percentage of the economy those clusters make up. So if you look at retail, hospitality, food, 21.9% of our economy is made up by that cluster. Manufacturing, 19.9, almost 20% of our economy is manufacturing, and so on and so forth. Looking down at the bottom left, as Dr. Boone mentioned, total number of jobs advertised over 30 days in October was 7,218 job advertisements. He went into some detail on how many, 58% were below $15 an hour, 25% were part-time, 15% were out of sector or out of region. When we look at, in those ads, we look at what education requirements are listed. You can see that, 26% of the jobs advertised requested a high school degree or equivalent. 2.5% of the jobs advertised requested an associate's degree. 6% a bachelor's degree, 2.5% a master's degree, and as Dr. Boone referred to earlier, 63% of the jobs advertised had no education requirement listed whatsoever. What I'll say about this is over the last 3 months, these numbers have been very consistent in education requirements. It's also been very consistent what we're seeing in terms of wage rates, full-time versus part-time, and jobs in the region versus jobs out of the region. All those percentages have been very consistent. Right in the bottom middle, you can see the median wage rate for South Central Kentucky. If you took every job in our region, every single job at every single level, and you ran the wages from the lowest wage to the maximum wage, the one that would be right smack dab in the middle would be $33,600 per year, or if you translate that into a wage rate, $16.60 per hour. That is the median wage for all occupations in our region. Unemployment rates, we'll touch on that. So what you have on the unemployment rates are two snapshots. There's a South Central Kentucky snapshot last year versus this year, and then there's a U.S. snapshot last year versus this year. And so looking at South Central Kentucky, you can see that in September of 2019, we had a unemployment rate of 3.9%. For this most recent September of 2020, we had a unemployment rate of 4.8%. You can see the U.S., how that compares to the U.S. average below it, 3.5% in September 2019 to 7.9% September 2020. So what you'll see there is Kentucky is, compared to the nation right now, Kentucky's doing pretty well in terms of unemployment rate, much better than the national average. And when we look at we went back and we looked at, well, what was the average unemployment rate in 2019? It was 4.2%. So, that was the average in 2019. We're at 4.8 right now. So we're not quite back to the pre-COVID levels of unemployment, but we're getting pretty close to it. If you looked at a month by month unemployment rates in 2019, there were 1 or 2 months that had a 4.7, 4.8% unemployment rate in 2019. So we're getting close to those pre-COVID levels of unemployment.
And John, I've got just a quick question. When you mentioned that Kentucky was doing better than the United States overall, this specifically, though, is our region of Kentucky.
South Central Kentucky is doing better than the national average. Yes. Yeah, thank you for clarifying. Yes, if I said Kentucky, I meant South Central Kentucky.
Well, we've got to, we've got to show that we're doing good. That to me is a really impressive number compared to the national number.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the good news. That's the silver lining. I would say if you look at that last bullet, our wage rates continue to lag the national average. And if you kind of go back and look at what, 58% of our jobs are below $15 an hour, and 25% of our jobs are part-time, and there's some overlap there. We're not as competitive nationally in wage rates, and I think you're going to see that as this presentation goes on. We're not here to suggest that we have to be, but that's just, if you look at the numbers, they are what they are, and our wage rates continue to lag national averages and in most cases state average. So we'll get into some of that as we go forward. You'll see some of those wage rates by sector. But in terms of unemployment, yes, we're this region is doing well. I mean, I think we have 7,200 jobs is advertised. I mean, that indicates we have a vibrant economy that we have lots of opportunity here. So certainly a good news story. So Leslie, Robert, any questions or?
No, I think that's a really nice summary, John. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll transition into the kind of the cluster or sector look, and we'll begin with the retail, hospitality, food sector. As mentioned, this is the single largest. When you cluster these together, this is the single largest cluster that we've got. Total number of jobs in the region, 28,600. That's both filled and unfilled. You see that in the top left. Below that on the left, you see that it makes up 21.9% of our regional economy. So that's big, and you can look how that compares to the Kentucky average and the U.S. average, which is right below that. So we're slightly larger than the Kentucky and U.S. average in terms of the percentage of our economy that's made up by retail, hospitality, food. And then bottom left, you can see that over the last 3 years, the 3-year percent change in average annual wages per worker, 8.9%. So strong wage growth in retail, hospitality, food, and you can see how that compares to the Kentucky and U.S. average. I think, as we've discussed on previous monthly open jobs reports, that there's a lot of pressure on retail, hospitality, food in terms on the wages, and there's a lot of need in this sector, and one of the ways that you get after needing workers is you raise your wages. So going to the middle of the slide, number of job advertisements over the last 30 days, 2,225. This made up 31% of all jobs advertised. So almost a third of the 7,218 jobs was for retail, hospitality, food sector positions. Who were the top 5 companies posting jobs in the last 30 days? You can see Dollar General with 68 postings, McDonald's, Radcliffe Company, Advanced Auto Parts, and Lowe's. In the number of jobs each of those companies, the number of job advertisements that they ran. Bottom center, you can see what were the top 5 advertised job positions. So at number 1, far and away, retail salesperson, 474 job advertisements. What you'll see out, we provide data for those, for employers, for economic development folks, for job seekers. A retail salesperson's, locally, the average annual wage is $26,300. And as a point of comparison, we provide 2 points of comparison to the local wage rate. You'll see the state wage rate there in blue, which is $26,500, so only a difference of $200. So very close. And then we also include a Northern Tennessee average wage rate, and we're doing that because as we've explained on previous versions of this broadcast, our proximity to Northern Tennessee, given our proximity to Northern Tennessee, we know that there's a lot of folks that, live in Kentucky, work in Tennessee, or live in Tennessee, work in Kentucky. So there's a lot of back and forth across the border for jobs. So we have access to 5 counties in Northern Tennessee for their data. And that's what we pull as a point of comparison. We do not have, it's important to note that we don't have access to Nashville-Davidson County data, which would probably drive up the numbers a lot higher just because it's a metropolitan area in and around Nashville. But I will say these 5 counties around Nashville are bedroom communities of Nashville. And so I think some of the wage rates you'll see are a bit reflected by the fact that they are, bedroom communities and have close proximity to Nashville. So there's a little graphic there on which 5 counties we're referring to. And you can kind of see as a point of comparison what our local average wages are compared to the state, compared to Northern Tennessee. So as mentioned, number 1, retail salesperson, that's followed by first line supervisors of retail salespersons, 3rd, first line supervisors of food preparation and serving workers, 4th, fast food and counter workers, 5th, janitors and cleaners. And then just analysis. So I've touched on some of this already. So again, 2,255 job advertisements comprises 31% of all the job advertisements in the month of October. We've touched on this before in this forum that, retail, hospitality, food, Not a lot of educational requirements for this, not a lot of credential requirements for this cluster. And, you know, kind of given that, the wages are kind of, you know, we see the lowest average wages in this cluster. I thought what was interesting to note, of the 2,255 jobs, 31%, or almost 700 of them, were for part-time positions. And then lastly, if you look at the top 3 demand locations, this probably would not be a surprise to anybody watching, but Bowling Green was number 1 with 744 ads, followed by Franklin, followed by Glasgow. So really kind of, you know, 3 of our communities that are sitting on major interstate or highway systems, you know, with lots of hospitality and restaurants and tourist, you know, venues are generating the highest number of job advertisements. So that's retail, hospitality, food. Pending any you know, questions from Leslie or Dr. Boone.
I don't have any, John. Again, that's a great introduction to retail and hospitality and great overview. Thank you. Yeah,
I mean, I used the word before. I mean, this is our 3rd iteration of this, and these numbers are very consistent with what we've seen, what we saw last month and the month prior. So if you're watching this for the 2nd or 3rd time, you may be feeling like this is deja vu, but it's just it's consistency in the numbers that we're seeing. Okay, Leslie, if we could move forward to manufacturing. Okay, so manufacturing is our single largest industry sector. We don't cluster this with anything else. This is just a single sector, and as such, 26,223 filled and unfilled jobs in our region. It is, you know, it makes up almost 20% of all jobs in our region, which, you know, 19.9%. And you can see how that compares in the kind of on the right, on the left side in the middle to the US and Kentucky average. Kentucky average manufacturing makes up 12.6% of the economy, and the US average is 8.2%. So we, as a percentage of our economy, I mean, we are far exceeding the kind of the national average. We have a lot of eggs in the manufacturing basket. Yeah, bottom left, you know, another kind of snapshot on 3-year percent change in average annual wage for workers at plus 5.2%, which slightly exceeds the Kentucky and US averages. Going to the middle, you know, top middle, number of jobs advertised over the last 30 days, 346. Again, this has been very consistent. What I like to, you know, what I like to do is look at, you know, 346 job advertisements equates to almost 5% of all job postings. And so if you think about, okay, manufacturing makes up 20% of all of our economy, but only 5% of our advertised jobs. I mean, there's a delta there, a pretty good delta there, which I think is interesting. 346 seems fairly low, a fairly low number of job postings, given that manufacturing is such a big driver of our local economy. Who are the top 5 companies posting? Number 1 is Purdue Farms. You'll see in parentheses under that, that's actually in Ohio County. As you know, Dr. Boone alluded to, outer region, we have some companies outer region outside of our 10-county area whose job advertisements do populate, and Purdue Farms is an example of that out of Ohio County. Next would be Toyo Automotive Parts, then Luttrell Staffing Group, followed by Hinkle, followed by Dart. And so you can see they were the top 5, and then you know how many advertisements each of those companies ran over the last 30 days in the month of October. Top 5 jobs advertised. Again, this is consistent month to month that we've seen so far. So first line supervisor production workers is number 1, 106 job advertisements for that position. You can see the local average wage is $56,100. And you can see how that compares to the Kentucky and Northern Tennessee, average wage. Number 2, production workers. Number 3, inspectors, testers, sorters, samplers, and weighers. Number 4, molding, core making, casting, machine setters, and operators. Number 5, bakers. So in terms of analysis, I've kind of mentioned, at 20% of our economy, we're 11 points higher than the U.S. average in terms of, what manufacturing represents. Given that manufacturing is so prominent in our region, that does drive a need on the job seeker part, or I should say on employer part. Employers are, they need folks with strong employability skills, strong math skills, some STEM aptitude to work in manufacturing. A lot of our manufacturing is advanced manufacturing, and so it requires some strong aptitude in STEM and mechanical skills as well.
And I would just add to that point, I think that's a really good point. That is really one of the main reasons why employers should really strive to list educational requirements very explicitly when possible on job postings.
Yeah, I agree. I think that would certainly be helpful. One of the things new we've done this month is we kind of further broke down these 346 job advertisements in manufacturing. And what we found when we broke this out were that 51% were identified as full-time positions, 8% as part-time, 7% as temporary positions, and 34%, almost a third, it didn't specify, either full-time, part-time, or temp. It would just didn't specify it at all. So that's manufacturing. Pending any questions or comments.
John, I was just going to add, this is extremely informative because there may be some people, especially if they're new to the region, wondering why there is so much focus in education on STEM, why we have so many STEM related activities and like career type fairs where students can learn about careers in these areas. And I think this explains why. It's a huge part of our economy.
Yes. It's it as a single sector, it's definitely the big dog. All right. If there's no further comments or questions, we'll go to healthcare. So healthcare social assistance. This is the third cluster we'll look at. So this cluster makes up 16,496 filled and unfilled jobs in our region. And you can see that it makes up 12.5% of our economy, or 1/8. And you can see how that compares to the Kentucky and U.S. average, which it's slightly below Kentucky at 14.5% and U.S. 14.4%. And then 3-year percent average annual wages per worker, only 1.1% growth. We've touched on this a couple of times over the last few months. This is really kind of a surprising, almost statistic that our wages have remained so flat in healthcare and social assistance, especially as you compare them to the U.S. and Kentucky average. And then, for those of us in workforce development, there's a huge need for healthcare workers in our region, and we're we definitely in this market, especially Franklin, Bowling Green, this part of our 10-county region, we're competing with Nashville and in healthcare in Northern Tennessee. So it's surprising that our wages have been fairly stagnant over the last 3 years, given how competitive the market is. Looking at the total number of job advertisements over the last 30 days, 1,064 jobs advertised for healthcare and social assistance. Who did the advertising? Who did the job posting? At number 1 was Home Instead Senior Care with 112 job advertisements, followed by HCA, followed by Commonwealth Health Corporation, followed by Twin Lakes Regional Medical Center, again, parentheses, Litchfield, Kentucky, technically outside of our region, but posting that, but their ads are spilling in to the data we collect, and the Justice Healthcare, number 5. Going to the bottom center, top 5 advertised jobs over the last 30 days. So far and away, number 1, RN, 318 with a red asterisk, which I'll get into right now. So when we look at the RN position at $318, the reason we put an asterisk there is because what we found as we really kind of peel back those RN job advertisements is how many of them might not necessarily be in our region. So for the month of October, what I found is that out of the 318 RN positions that were advertised, 53 of them, or 17% positions. So they weren't necessarily looking for an RN to work in our communities. They were looking for an RN to travel elsewhere. So we don't strip that number out. We keep it in there, but we do put an asterisk on there. Just say that's an interesting point that we ought to be aware of. The other thing, when I looked at the RN positions, those 318 job advertisements, I looked at, okay, what were the top 3 demand locations? So Bowling Green, number 1 with 178, followed by Glasgow with 26, which seems a little bit low for Glasgow to me. But number 3 was Litchfield. And again, as mentioned a minute ago, Litchfield is technically not in our region, but some of those ads are spilling over into the number count that we get. So that's healthcare and social assistance. Pending any questions or comments. You've seen this movie before. Again, this is very consistent to what we found last month and also in August. So we'll go forward to professional services. So professional service cluster, what I like to do here is I like to define what this is. And on all these slides, what we've done is, if you look under the word professional service clusters at the top, in really fine print underneath it's kind of a definition of what makes up the professional services cluster. So in this case, we're talking about telecommunications jobs, data processing, rental and leasing services, professional, scientific, and technical services, management of companies, and administrative and support services. So all those different, it's a broad swath of job types that make up the professional services cluster. So the professional services cluster, within our, total number of jobs in the region, 12,331. That's filled and unfilled. You can see kind of in the middle left, percent of total regional employment, 9.4% of all of our jobs. And you can see how that compares to the Kentucky and US average, which is slightly below. And then kind of bottom left, 3-year percent annual average annual change per worker at 11.1%. Really strong wage growth for the professional services cluster in South Central Kentucky, especially as you compare it to the Kentucky and US average. Going to the middle, number of jobs advertised over the last 30 days, 1,152. You can see who the top 5 companies posting jobs were. So WKU at number 1, Home Job Staffing at number 2. I'll just pause here. Home Job Staffing, as I've researched this is a, It's not a brick and mortar business that we have in our region. In fact, I'm gonna read from its webpage. Home job staffing is a job search agent or representative of any employer. So, basically they're looking for folks to work from home. Doesn't really matter where you live. It's quite, I would argue that all these jobs are probably, from an economic development standpoint, aren't real jobs. It's not a brick and mortar location. It's not an employer in our region, but they do have jobs for job seekers in our region that want to work from home, conceivably. So you can argue that, yes, these are real jobs and these jobs should count towards the total number, the total 7,218, or you could say, well, these might be out of region. Technically, the company's not here. So anyway, we leave it in there, we count it, but it's worth noting that, home job staffing, and there's others like that pop up to a lesser degree of, kind of work from home types jobs that do get pulled into the overall number of job advertisements. Number 3, JP Morgan Chase, 4 IBM, and number 5 is 5-star. Top 5 jobs advertised in the last 30 days. Again, this is consistent. Number 1, far and away, customer service representative, 171 advertisements. Number 2, software developer. Number 3, food service managers. Number 4, medical and health service managers. Number 5, medical secretaries and admin assistants. So, if you're asking yourself, hey, wait a minute, why am I seeing food service and medical health jobs being listed under the professional services cluster? That's because what happens in the definition of professional services cluster, we say management of companies. So regardless of what sector you might be in, if you move up into management, that job kind of gets scooped up and counted under professional services as opposed to what sector you came from. So if we went back and looked at the healthcare and social services sector, or that cluster, and that number, the number that was generated, that number of jobs did not include medical and health service managers, because it's getting counted over here. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
All right, in terms of analysis, really, this is nothing really new here. It's professional services cluster makes up 16% of all the job advertisements. That's been fairly consistent over the last few months. As we've mentioned before, a lot of these jobs are very well suited for, work at home for the COVID economy. And as I mentioned up front, very strong wage growth in this sector locally. All right, any questions?
John, I will just add that, early on in the presentation, we talked about how data can influence our decision-making and programs that we offer in our region. I just wanted to highlight the second most populous job ad at 72 jobs for software developers. And in January, I want to let our audience know that we are launching a coding academy for software development and general IT in Warren County. So we are now accepting applications for that coding academy. In most cases, individuals will be fully funded to go through the 15-week coding bootcamp style academy. So that's a response that our workforce board has to, first, the changing economy due to COVID and just changing in general. Even before COVID, there was really good growth in this professional services cluster. And I would certainly call software development and coding an emerging job trend, an emerging industry in our region. And we want to get out ahead of that trend so that we don't have jobs and then are waiting for people trained up to fill those jobs. We want to go ahead and get people trained in anticipation of those jobs coming to our region, but also in anticipation of people being able to work from home. and entrepreneurs being developed, because we all know that software development is one of those things where you don't need bricks and mortar. So it's a really small investment in many cases on the front end for an entrepreneur to get developed, because you need a great computer and a great internet connection, and you can create a very successful business. So I just wanted to take a moment and give a shout out to our software development program, which launches in January. Anybody interested can contact us, and we can walk you through the process of how to apply and for funding. And take note, this job occupation is growing. It's here now, and it's only going to grow in the future. So I just wanted to make that comment, John. Thank you.
No, that's a great advertisement for it. I mean, if anything, I think what this pandemic has showed is that everybody's had to do this pivot to remote work, and pivot to online shopping, and pivot to more reliance on IT. So I think it's here to stay. It's only gonna get more and more prominent in software development and IT. It's not just, those jobs aren't just in that sector. I mean, you can take them to pretty much any sector. I mean, they need cybersecurity in the healthcare sector. They need strong IT skills in manufacturing to control the lines and how quickly things are moving down the line as things are getting produced. So really a lot of opportunity in this field across all sectors. Okay, let's move to the next. I think we're ready for construction. So construction makes up 7,180 filled and unfilled jobs in our 10-county region. It's accounts for 5.4% of regional employment. And if you look at the 3-year percent change in average annual wages per worker, it's plus 7.2%, which is good, which is consistent with the state and slightly lags the U.S. average. Again, the consistency is the theme here. Only 109 job advertisements last month, which is, if you live here and you understand how it is growing and just kind of booming, that is a really low number for what we, for all the construction that we see going on around us in South Central Kentucky. So I'll talk a little bit more to that in the analysis section. Who are the top 5 companies posting job advertisements in the last 30 days? Number 1, Charles DeWeese Construction, followed by Scotty's Contracting. Number 3, Commonwealth of Kentucky. Number 4, Medix Group. Number 5, Lee Company. Top 5 advertised jobs in the last 30 days. Number 1 is construction laborers, followed by plumbers, pipe fitters, and steam fitters. Number 3, electricians. Number 4, operating engineers and other construction equipment operators. Number 5, carpenters. So when we look at 109 job advertisements out of over 7,200, construction only accounted for 1.5% of all jobs advertised, which again, as I mentioned, that feels very, very low. What might account for this? Well, we think what might account for it is the fact that construction has the highest percentage of folks that are self-employed. If you look, a lot of our construction companies, a lot of our subcontractors that do construction, it's a guy or a gal that's self-employed, and they might have a couple of workers under them. They are typically, these folks that are doing a lot of this subcontracting, they're not going on to Indeed, to Monster, to Career Builder to post job advertisements, which is where we're getting the 7,200 number from. So that I think that's a big reason why it's an artificially low number. Construction does not go to those major job portals and advertise. That can be kind of expensive, kind of costly, and probably not very effective and a good use of their money. Probably not good ROI for them. So they're not using those mediums to recruit. So which I think is a big reason why we continue to see such a low number.
And John, just from first glance here, at least to me, what I remember seeing, this seems to be one of the highest wage sectors. Would you agree?
I think if I think from top to bottom, I think the wages are consistently high. I mean, I don't have very low wages. That I don't think they have a lot of really low end wages,
Mm-hmm.
and the top end wages are probably limited. But I think in the middle, in terms of kind of a band in the middle, they are very strong wages across.
Right. Just compared to the other sectors, the salary seems to be overall, it seems to be higher for the different top spots.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's a large, these are skilled positions. They pay well. Yeah, they pay well. I think if you look at other sectors, you might have in the whole sector, you might see like anywhere from minimum wage to six figures. This one's a little more consistent in that, this is kind of in that middle band of very strong wages across all these different skill trades. So one other interesting data point, this is something kind of new we looked at this month when we peeled back the 109 jobs that were advertised for construction. What I found was that 13% of those were outside the region and 15% were listed as part-time. So I thought that was interesting. 109 isn't a lot to begin with, but when you subtract out 13% outside the region and 15% being part-time, that's an even lower number. So any other comments on construction?
Well, and to go back to what you were saying, just because the number is low here, that does not necessarily mean that the jobs aren't out there. It's just that this particular sector, they may not utilize the platforms that Jobs EQ monitors. So to me, that says, hey, if you're interested in construction, it would be a great idea to work with the board because we can connect you to employers who aren't necessarily advertising on these platforms.
That's absolutely right, Leslie. Yeah. And I think that's a really important distinction between open jobs and advertised jobs. And just going back to the healthcare scenario too, you'll notice that we have a great need in this area for physicians. But physicians wasn't listed in the healthcare slide. Well, that's because many of the physician openings aren't listed on Monster, Career Builder, other job boards. Those positions are recruited for by high-level management in hospitals and clinics, CEOs. You also notice in the business slide, the professional services slide, that there weren't high-level management positions mentioned in the number of open jobs. And also the averages would be kind of scaled up for some of those higher level management positions, but they're not being advertised most likely on Monster, Career Builder, other websites like that. So we are just talking open jobs that are posted on the internet that Jobs EQ can obtain. And I just wanted to take a moment before I know you move on, John. I know we're wrapping up here. And thank our audience again for joining us. We stay busy here with the Workforce Board, and even though we're recording this, I have another meeting to get to, so I just wanted to drop off, but didn't want to not say anything and just log off. So again, thank you all for joining us, and feel free to ask us any questions via email, phone, social media after today's presentation.
All right, thanks, Dr. Boone. So we'll, Leslie, if you go forward one, as I've mentioned before, though, the deeper you dive into this stuff, the muddier the water gets. But the data is imperfect, but as imperfect as the data is, it's better than no data, and it's it's close enough that we can use it, and we can use it to drive decision making. So I think this is the last industry cluster we're going to look at is transportation, distribution, and logistics. You can see that it makes up 4,248 jobs in our region. Percentage of total regional employment is 3.2%, and you can see what the 3-year percent change in average annual wage per worker is, plus 5.8%, and how that compares to the Kentucky and U.S. average. Total number of jobs advertised over the last 30 days, 1,217. And what I'll kind of pause here for a second. So that 1,217, that means that transportation, distribution, logistics accounted for 17% of all jobs advertised. And as a point of comparison, which I did earlier, it makes up 3.2% of our regional employment, but it's making up 17% of all job advertisements. I mean, that's a big delta. And we'll get into some of that. So let's look at the top 5 companies posting jobs in the last 30 days. Number 1, Total Transport of Mississippi, who we've talked about in previous segments. They're out of Richland, Mississippi. 40 job advertisements for this company. That's followed by Soar Transportation, number 4, Brown Trucking, number 3, Brown Trucking, number 4, Tractor Supply Company, number 5, Bluegrass Dedicated. Top 5 advertised jobs in the last 30 days. Again, this is very consistent. Heavy and tractor trailer truck drivers, folks with a CDLA. Number of job advertisements, 584. There's a big red asterisk right next to that. So let's talk about that for a second. When we go over here to the analysis and you see that red asterisk, what we found is that of that 1,217, of that number, 443 of the, not of the 1,217, my apologies, of the heavy tractor and trailer truck drivers, of the 584, 443 of those positions were for over-the-road truck driving jobs. And they were being advertised by companies like Total Transport of Mississippi, who are advertising in our region, but they have no physical presence here. They don't have a brick and mortar location. They don't, they're not technically operating in South Central Kentucky, although they're obviously they're operating through, they're driving through. We've had this conversation in previous segments. A lot of these over-the-road truck driving companies, they don't really care where you live. They just care if you can drive for them. So they advertise everywhere. They run ads. So Total Transport of Mississippi, they ran 40 advertisements in about 35 different zip codes over that 30-day period. They're just spamming our region looking for people that can drive a truck to come work for them. So you could argue that those jobs are technically they shouldn't be counted. They're artificially driving up the total job vacancies that we've got in the region on the one hand. But are they jobs? Yes, they're jobs, and a job seeker in our region could take one of those jobs.
Right. Well, I just think it's extremely interesting when you look at, people say all the time, oh, we've got 7,000 open jobs in the region. But when you start really looking at it, out of this 584, we've got 443 that are not in our region at all. So I think it's important to do this because it really brings clarity to what jobs we have here. Someone, someone could take a job with the Mississippi place, but it's not a job in our region necessarily.
Yeah, I always like to think about this, looking at this through two different lenses. If you're a job seeker, it's a job. It counts. But if you're on the other side, if you're looking at it through the lens of economic development, through workforce development, through if you're an educator, a politician, what have you, and you're wringing your hands about this 7,200 jobs, well, wait a minute, 7,200 is not necessarily 7,200. That's not 7,200 employers, tax-paying, tax-paying individuals who are sitting inside of our region in brick and mortar locations or what have you, saying, I've got all these jobs to fill. I mean,
right. And I think that
we still have a lot of open jobs. Don't get me wrong, and we still need to work our tails off to fill those as best we can. But 7,218 jobs, there's an asterisk on that, right? I mean, it's
right. Yeah, it's all about perception and understanding what that number really means. And I think that's why it's so important that we do this.
Yeah. All right. I guess on that analysis piece too, I mean, I found that 59 of the heavy and truck driving jobs came out of Ohio County. Again, technically out of region. And so when we subtract out the 68% that we know were from companies out of the region, the closer number of heavy tractor and trailer truck driver vacancies in our region is probably closer to 208.
Mm-hmm.
Still a large number. Still a lot
right.
A lot of seats that need to be filled, but it's not almost 600, which is where we began. So, all right, that's transportation, distribution, logistics. So let's get into just some data trends. So this is a new slide, and so all I'm attempting to do here is we're starting to, now that this is our third segment, for capturing October 2020 open jobs. We're not quite at the point where we have like strong trends, but we can look back and look at, okay, what the numbers look like in August for each of these sectors, and overall what they look like in September, and what are they looking like in October. So if you go to the top left, total number of jobs advertised in South Central Kentucky workforce region, in August it was 7,442. In September, that number jumped up by 307, and there were 7,749 job advertisements in the month of September, and then it dropped for this last month for October. It dropped 531 to the 7,218 number that we've been talking about today. I've done the same type of data analysis for each of the clusters or sectors, how they went up or down since August, since we started doing this monthly open jobs report. And let's go to the final slide.
Okay.
It's kind of the summary slide. And so I'll talk a little bit to that. So it's really on the second bullet. First bullet, again, we have a lot of open jobs here. Even though some are out of sector, even though some are part-time, we have a lot of open jobs. We have a very vibrant economy. When we looked at on the previous slide, as we saw the numbers, where they started in August and they went up in September and then they came back down in October, I was trying to figure out why were there 500 less jobs advertised in October than September? And I did come across, and I linked it on here, I came across an article that if you go back to early October, there's still a lot of election uncertainty in the marketplace. And, so this was an AP News article that was, forecasting that that the number of job postings for the month of October was probably going to shrink. They were forecasting that was probably going to shrink due to election uncertainty. And so I think that's how it's played out. nationally and locally. Obviously, as I mentioned, we had 531 less jobs advertised in October than we did in September. So I think that's what we would attribute it to, is just some election uncertainty. Third bullet there, we've talked about at the very beginning. We are close to, almost back to pre-COVID levels in terms of our unemployment rate. Again, in 2019, the average unemployment rate for the entire 2019 year was 4.2%. Last month, we were at 4.8. So we're not quite back to that average, but we're getting close. And that, obviously, if you go back to March, April timeframe, we were looking at an 18% unemployment rate, and we're now down to 4.8. So we're almost healthy. If we consider, if we consider a 4 to 4.5% unemployment rate healthy, then we're almost healthy. And then the last bullet there, I think we've kind of exhausted that. We've talked about the makeup of the 7,218 jobs and how that kind of splits out in terms of part-time, full-time, wage rate data, and how many are out of sector, out of region. So that's the summary. Leslie, any comments or closing thoughts?
Well, again, it just every time we do this, and I know there are some sectors that it's pretty consistent, but every time we do this, I'm consistently surprised by at least a few things. And the fact that in this region, our unemployment, you said in March, was around 18%. Is that correct? The fact that
really April, March it started to jump up. In April, it hit 18%.
So the fact that we're now at 4.2%, to me, that should be a headline in a newspaper. That's huge. So that's a testament to our region getting back into the workforce. That's fantastic. So that's probably my biggest takeaway. There are other takeaways as well, but it is. I always take something new away from these sessions. And if I can take something away, I think for employers, for community leaders, for anyone connected with economic development in the region, they should be watching this. This helps give tremendous insight into the number that's always just sort of been there, that no one really questions. And I think that's why it's so good and I know you do a ton of work with this, but I think that's why it's so valuable.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. I guess the way I would like to close is that, if you're watching this and you're an employer or you're in economic development and you need analysis or you need some homework done, we have the tools to do it. I mean, hopefully you can kind of see that we can really dig into some all kinds of data with Open Jobs. We have another platform called Burning Glass that's very similar. But as a workforce board, one of the things that we're here to do is to do this type of analysis, and we can do that. We can do it for your company. I mean, so just reach out to us, let us know what you need, and we'll do our best to do this for you. This is one of the services that we provide as a workforce board.
Sure. And one other thing I was going to mention, because this webcast will be posted on social media, it will be posted on YouTube. If you're watching and you would like a PDF copy of the slides, that's very easy to do. If you go to our website, there's a tab for webinars, and you just click on webinar, this particular webinar for October. And when you sign up, you gain access immediately to a PDF of all these slides. So if there was something that, I know with the screen, sometimes the tiny print is hard to make out. It would be good to have a full page copy, and it's something that you might be able to use for a presentation or reference. But that's available on our website, southcentralworkforce.com. Click webinars and you'll find Open Jobs Report, Analysis and Review. And it's a simple registration, and we don't put you on mailing lists. It's simply so we can say we've had X number of reports downloaded.
All right. Well, Leslie, once again, thank you for setting up this session and putting this platform together so that we could present this data. And hopefully for the viewers out there, you found this interesting. I'm not a data analysis / economist person by trade. So thank you for having the patience to watch this through and bear with us as we presented this information.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thanks again. We hope you join us for the next month's Open Jobs Report Analysis and Review. And as always, you can access this at southcentralworkforce.com and register for the webinar version of this session and get immediate access to all the slides that we shared with you today. Thanks for joining us.